Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let's start at the beginning. An Australian diplomat that had associations with the Clinton Foundation tips off the FBI. This in coordination and association with a dossier that was paid for by the Clinton Foundation, or paid for, by the Democratic Party in association with Hillary Clinton, created a dossier. Now, the dossier had all of these salacious details. One of the main details that people know about is that Donald Trump was peed on, or at the very least, a hooker was peed on, a Russian hooker was peed on, or peed on the bed that Obama slept in because Donald Trump hated Obama so much. That's the thing that sticks out in people's mind when they think about the dossier, but that's such an explosive detail. Comey has said that the dossier was salacious and unverified, and yet, nonetheless, it was leaked. So everybody could see it, and so the press could use it and point to Donald Trump and show this Russia collusion nonsense. They've spent years talking about this, the media antagonistic to Donald Trump, throwing out all levels of objectivity out the window, at the very least what they would consider objectivity out the window, and going balls out at trying to find anything on Donald Trump. And they found bupkis. One thing after the next are falling apart. They've shown no main evidence of collusion, just a bunch of nebulous threads that they haven't necessarily been able to connect to anything. Did you know that as late as 2017, the similar people run out of Dianne Feinstein's office and a bunch of wealthy plutocrats are funding the same people who conjured up the dossier to continue their quote-unquote investigation into Donald Trump? Think about that. 7 to 10 plutocrats on New York and California, essentially the two coasts, the Democratic ends. Plutocrats sympathetic to Hillary Clinton or sympathetic to the Democratic Party, continuing to fund an investigation into Donald Trump that is running parallel with the investigation of Robert Mueller. Why do you need two investigations? If you have Mueller doing the job of the FBI or Mueller doing the job, you wanted a special prosecutor, you got a special prosecutor. You got that special prosecutor on information obtained from a dossier paid for by the Clinton Foundation. And let's be honest, the fact that Comey fired, or that Donald Trump fired Comey. Comey wasn't either incompetent or corrupt, so Comey should have been fired. It was somewhat of a problem politically to fire him, in which case you ended up with Mueller. But regardless of how you got Mueller, Mueller is the person who's supposed to be doing the investigation. Why do you need 7 to 10 plutocrats paying to do a parallel investigation? That should disheart, or that should bother. Let me say it this way. I hope I'm not the only one bothered by that. Why are plutocrats fucking with our electoral system in this way? And the Democrats have lost all democratic norms. Like, I understand they like to point to Donald Trump and say Donald Trump is something fundamentally different. Donald Trump is breaking democratic norms. No, your party is breaking democratic norms. You lost. Get over it. You lost. She failed to reality show hosts. And however hurtful that may be, she lost. The idea that you found 7 to 10 useful idiots to give you a bunch of money because they hate Donald Trump to continue digging in this well that you're going to strike gold or oil at some point, even though it's been years and you've got bupkis, that's somewhat problematic. That's somewhat problematic and magnificently undemocratic. It's one thing if you went after the Trump for the emollients clause. I suspect there are two main reasons that you don't. It is a little shamefully hypocritical to say that Donald Trump is using the government or the federal government to maximize his profit. But the idea that the Clinton Foundation was maximizing their profit off of donors and everything else from these foreign influences don't matter at all. It is a shameful, hypocritical argument to make between those two things. So I don't necessarily think they want to make that argument. I don't think they want to have that conversation of piecemealing why it's okay for Hillary Clinton to monetize the State Department, but it's not okay for Donald Trump to monetize the presidency. The second part of this is this idea of hitting the left. I suspect part of the reason they want to do this is because they want to find this thing of being able to tag the left and saying that all of these things, all of this rhetoric and stuff that was talked about during the campaign was literally just Russia. It was all the Russians. And the status quo is perfectly fine. The public thinks status quo is perfectly fine. See, status quo is perfectly fine. If it wasn't for the Russians intervening into the campaign, there would have been no issue here. Hillary Clinton was perfectly okay. She would have won that election if it wasn't for the Russians. That's essentially what they want to get across. That's laughably ridiculous, but that is what they want to get across. And they're using that as a way to hit the left. Bernie Sanders working with the Russians in order to hurt dear Hillary Clinton. Jill Stein is working with the Russians in order to hurt Hillary Clinton. Everybody was working with the Russians, or at the very least useful idiots to the Russians, in order to hurt Hillary Clinton. This stuff is nonsense. And yet they dig nonetheless, hoping to strike oil at some point into the future. I'm bothered by this. This annoys me. Again, I don't care if you go against Donald Trump. I care about the way you go after him, if that makes sense. A group of wealthy donors from New York and California have forked out $50 million to fund a Russian investigation being conducted by Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, and former Senate staffer for Dianne Feinstein. The bombshell revelation is made in a footnote to the House Intelligence Committee's newly released report on Russian interference in a presidential campaign. Fusion GPS hired Steele, a former MI16 agent, to investigate Trump's activities in Russia. He will go on to produce a 35-page report alleging collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. The Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee funded the project. A law firm representing the organization hired Fusion GPS in April 2016. While the dossier project failed to help Hillary Clinton win the presidency, Fusion GPS and Steele have continued their investigative work. I bet they have, and I bet it's pretty damn lucrative, digging for gold that you probably would never find. That's according to statements from Daniel Jones, a former Dianne Feinstein staffer who runs the Penn Quarter Group, a Washington, D.C. consulting firm. The House report states that in March 2017, Jones told the FBI about a project he's working on with Steele and Fusion GPS that is being funded to the tune of $50 million by 7 to 10 wealthy donors from California and New York. In late March 2017, Jones met with FBI regarding PQG, which he described as exposing Florence influence in Western elections. Haha, that's awesome. Reads the committee's report. Redacted told FBI that PQG was funded by 7 to 10 wealthy donors located primarily in New York and California who provided approximately $50 million. Redacted further stated that PQG had secured the services of Steele, his associates, and Fusion GPS to continue exposing Russian influence in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, reads the reports, which adds that Jones planned to share the information he obtained with the policymakers and with the press. Look, here's the thing. Whether you like or dislike Trump, if this was a Republican Party, I would be screaming the same way. There is something problematic with 7 to 10 rich fucks that can't get over the fact that they lost the election and decides that they want to continue to stick their fingers into the political apparatus in this way. It's bad enough they're bad politicians. It's bad enough that they buy policymakers. It is bad enough that they have the influence that they have in our political system as is. It is worse when they are running parallel investigations to the organizations that are created to have those investigations, because they themselves have some kind of political and financial incentives to find information that may actually not exist, at least going by the previous report that was released by Steele. You have a report that is unverified, and continuing on with the unverified status of the report, we want you to find more stuff like that previous report that you produced that was unverified and salacious. I'll leave it at that. I'm just saying, I don't care whether this Republican, Democrat, somewhere in between, some of the organizations, I don't care. I don't like this idea with plutocrats investing their money to our political system. It is not a democratic political system where you can have 7 to 9 people, 7 to 10 people investing gobs of money, $50 million. What can you do with $50 million with regards to dealing with poverty and everything else? No, we don't want to deal with that. We have all of these issues in this country that we can and should deal with. But no, we want to spend our $50 million fucking around with the secondary process to pull more unverified and more salacious information on the guy who we didn't necessarily like winning that office. We have a problem with our system. And that problem begins and ends with cash flowing in the way that it flows through the system. 7 to 10 people are now literally plutocrats spending $50 million to go after the president of the United States. Whether you like Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, you have to be honest. This is problematic. Just from the idea of the structures of the government itself, this is problematic. What is the point of having Robert Mueller if you're going to have this other shadowy organization paid for by enemies of Donald Trump running parallel investigations going after President of the United States, Donald Trump. You have him on the emollients clause, which means I have to ask the question, why don't you use that as your reasoning per se, as opposed to whatever the hell this group is trying to do? I'll leave it at that. This one is not going to be long. This one is just a, by the way, this is what 7 to 10 rich fucks are doing, investigating themselves or instigating themselves into your political process. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.